I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs with your permission from the book Sacred Spaces, which is once again not the work of a religious scholar, but a Pakistani whose heart is devoted to this subject. And with that lens, I'd like to share with you that the sacred spaces I visited, shrines and meditation lodges throughout the Indus Valley, are places where a Sufi sheikh's mystical authority is articulated. People have created these sanctuaries as tributes, as symbolic expressions of their acknowledgement of the divine. During my journey, I found places in nature that communicated divinity through their spectacular beauty. The local people were aware of the spiritual significance of these places and offered their prayers at architectural and natural sites alike. The magnetic power these sacred spaces exude inspires a sense of awe. Such shrines remind me how personal and experienced the inner dimension of Sufism is. A sheikh's legacy is never fixed in the imagination. Different perceptions of the divine mystery are reflected in the changing realities and ever-evolving rites and practices through which the devout integrate the sacred teachings into contemporary experience. Many schools of Quranic interpretation contend that an impenetrable gulf separates the individual and the divine. Sufi thought advances a different view of a personal, mystical, and even romantic relationship between the believer and the divine, the mystical lover and the beloved. Ritual practice is more than superstition. It gives each pilgrim a point of entry into a personal relationship with Allah. As I have traced the roots and rites of these spiritual pathways, my belief in the power of a specific place-based worship has grown stronger than ever. Narratives occupy a central position in Sufism in this part of the world. They are interwoven, told, and retold through some of the songs that Peter was talking about, Allan Fakir and his mentors, that we have seen in the Sevan Sharif documentary. Each generation reshapes the original narrative with memories based on their own perception and is flavored by changing political realities. The central element holding these narrative networks together is the telling and retelling of stories. Stories that affirm, reaffirm, and continually reshape the dimensions of Sufi piety and identity. For example, Heer Ranjha, all of these folk tales of the Indus are really Sufi based. You know, these are symbols of seeking the divine in a mortal pathway. And these ballads of Heer Ranjha, Sassi Punnu, Adam Durkhane, all of these are very much part of our living tradition. They are in our DNA. You know, all Pakistanis have heard this. As a child, I didn't understand that those were Sufi songs, but they are. And there are great poets that have written their kalams along these lines, such as Waris Shah's Heer, which is very, very famous, and which people have enacted and sung, and which is very much part of the piece. You know, Madiha Gohar's troupe was sharing a little fragment of Bulle Shah with you yesterday. That's another thing that is deeply entrenched in our psyche. So it's important to remember that it is not something that you can extricate. You know, it's not, you can't reduce it into, oh, this is shirk, this is a song, this is a dance, this is a, you know, it's all intertwined. And that narrative is part of who we are. And when we forget that, we become violent, we become lost. So I suggest that we really go and learn what these sheikhs have to teach us as we read our most amazing and fantastic book, the Holy Quran. But we can be informed by other narratives as well. It's important to keep your mind open and your heart open. So the last sentence that I wanted to read from here is that poetry and song are the languages of love. Both music and oral tradition are important to ritual practice in the Sufi tradition. They form a bridge between the dream and reality, between chaos and order, and in an artistic sense, between the mundane and the sublime. They are powerful tools in helping ordinary people understand that God created humans in the image of the divine. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll move to Peter now, and because we were talking about Indus, so maybe you can share more accounts from your times with the fakirs at which...
See, being here at a literature festival and not at a scientific conference as such, you know, so we are dealing with words, with literature, we are dealing with poets and so on. And I think that the role of poets is really to speak the truth, you know, whereas politicians exchange statements. It's really the singers and the poets who transport the feelings of people, their fears and their hopes across the borders. So it's very important to establish a contact beyond just a scholarly overview and so on. And I would say, you know, there is a danger that if we are sitting in a panel like that, that we are becoming a little bit aloof of what's actually the down-to-earth reality. Because for me, I would say the calendar is not an object of study, but rather a source of knowledge. It's a source of an oral tradition who has to tell things which you might not have heard about. And I think for a literary festival, it would be very important to close the gap between oral literature and the written scholarly or literary literature. And I would say, you know, if you're looking for that, it's right, you know, the calendar is sitting 3 o'clock night in front of your door, and he might not have taken a shower, but he's waiting to be fed by you, and he's waiting to tell you his stories. And so that would be something which would mean really open your ears to the literature. This is also a literature. It's not just what scholars have put into books that might be even more interesting. That's my word for that.
Thanks for the excellent comment. I think Bulle Shah was totally anti-scholars. And but to respond to your comments, I think I'll request you to add to what Peter said.
Yeah, I just want to say that yes, where Peter said that calendar was a source of study, not a source of study, but of knowledge. I want to say that study could be a source of knowledge too. But of course, we are not speaking about the same knowledge. I'm kidding, of course. But no, regarding Sewan also, there is one point very interesting for all the toleration spread by Sufism. It is actually the role played by the Hindu in different rituals. And of course, you know about the image of Pakistan outside Pakistan, for instance, in Europe. And when I spoke about the role played by the Hindu in the ritual in Sewan, usually people do not believe me because, of course, the power of the media is very strong. So anyway, the Hindu are still playing a role in Sewan in different rituals, especially in the ritual of Mendi, because the Mendi is performed 3 days, the 3 days of the Urs, and the first 2 days, there are Hindu family from Sewan who are performing Mendi, and the last one, the Sayed family. So it is, of course, a very interesting situation. But here again, I think that we have to be aware of the negotiation between different leading communities in Ceylon. And before partition, the Hindu were dominant in the economic field, because I could have access to some archives in the Clifton archives. There are seen archives in Clifton. And so if you have a look at the archives regarding Ceylon, most of the time the Hindu were the owners of the big house of the Haveli and other things. And after partition, most of the Hindu family left Ceylon and they went to India. But despite this change, it is very interesting to observe that there is a kind of balance, a repartition of the role between the leading Hindu family and the Muslim family in Ceylon.
Maybe Wasim, you could add a bit more on the, what you've been looking at as a scholar, much to the discussion on the role of a scholar, on how Sufi spaces and the shrines are zones of tolerance.
Yeah. I think we are all afraid that Pakistan moves increasingly towards a monochromatic society, and here we are sitting and advocating diversity, plurality, which is very much there in Ceylon Sharif and at other shrines in particular. What I would love to highlight is that taking up Michel's important term Sufi culture, that at the moment we face a kind of deculturalization of such phenomena of Sufi-inspired Islam in Pakistan. And we should not forget that these shrines are also spaces which allow ambiguity, liminality, where boundaries are transgressed, which is, these spaces are zones of tolerance, not only for women, but also for outsiders, if they could belong to the third gender, but they are also malangs wearing female attire with all the symbolism carried on within the Sufi tradition of Wisal and Mehndi and so on. So it also allows the paradox there. And where do we have that in other niches of culture? So there is, what I want to emphasize, there is not this absolutist right or wrong which we have in other normative brands of religion, and we should really appreciate that.
Thank you. We'll have to close this session, and just before we do that, Samina has a poem to share, and after that we'll just open the floor for discussion.
I would like to acknowledge Fehmida Riaz and Mahmood Jalal, who are here, who are fantastic poets, among other things. I have bought their books and found that people borrow them and never return them. So I suggest you also look in these books because they are special. The words of Jalaluddin Rumi, the great 13th century poet of Sufism, resonate for me today, and I know they will for you. What is to be done, O Muslims? For I do not recognize myself. I am neither Christian, nor Jew, nor Gabr, nor Muslim. I am not of the east, nor of the west, nor of the land, nor of the sea. I am not of nature's mint, nor of the circling heavens. I am not of the earth, nor of the water, not of air, not of fire. I am not of the empyrean, nor of the dust, nor of existence, not of entity. I am not of India, nor of China, nor of Bulgaria, nor of Sakis. I am the kingdom of Iraqan, nor the country of Khorasan. I am not of this world, nor of the next, nor of paradise, nor of hell. I am not of Adam, nor of Eve, nor of Eden and Rizwan. My place is the placeless, my trace is the traceless. 'Tis neither body nor soul, for I belong to the soul of the beloved. I have put duality away. I have seen that the two worlds are one. One I seek, one I know, one I see, one I call.
And it is most interesting that 3 centuries later, Bulle Shah's famous poem, Bulla Ki Jana Main Kaun, resonates the same message. So the message remains the same. So we'll have very quick questions and answers because we'll have to close this session in 10 minutes. Mic लाइएगा ज़रा. इनको दीजिए.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, surely Sufism is much older than Islam. It only flourished more under Islam. So do you find some commonality in pre-Islamic, like Christian mysticism or the Kabbalah? Are there any common threads there? Thank you.
I think the mystical tradition is a current flowing through all the major religions. We have a mysticism within Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, but of course, definitely so. Sufism as being the spiritual dimension of Islam is in particular very strong and has a lot of messages given and produced a lot of texts and Sufi messages and devotional practices as well. So it is particularly accentuated within Islam than in other religions, probably. But it allows a meeting, of course. It allows people from different religions to meet, to talk to each other, and in that way, this really promotes a kind of interfaith dialogue.
What I wanted to actually ask is, what are the common points? See, there was this Kabbalah, that was the Jewish